On episode 64 of Traveling from New Zealand to Japan, I went to a rural Vietnamese party. Okay, so today was a weird one. It started off with me getting a Vietnamese SIM card before walking through a park and getting absolutely hounded by these guys to clean my shoes since apparently they were just so dirty. So I let them do their thing, which just felt weird. And then after paying them, myself and a friend went to the War Remnants Museum, which if you haven't gone, I highly recommend it, but be warned because it is tough. On the outside, they have these really cool US military vehicles from the Vietnam War, and on the inside, they have a lot of weaponry that was used, but they also have exceedingly chilling footage of people who have been and were affected by Agent Orange, and also graphic photos showing the atrocities committed by the US during the war, and obviously I don't have footage of it out of respect for the museum and those affected, but I will say that what I saw that day stuck with me, and I still think about it to this day. After leaving the museum and unwinding for a bit, I then went to get some food and accidentally scared a poor girl.
Excuse me?
And then after eating, I decided to do something extremely questionable. So on my flight from Bangkok, I sat beside a cute Vietnamese girl who asked for my contact information, and that day she messaged me and invited me to a party with her friends an hour and a half out of town. And the logical, sensible thing would have been to say no because that sounded exceedingly sketchy, but I also just kind of wanted to go see what life in rural Vietnam was like, so I decided to get a grab for the long journey. And on the way, I talked to the driver through Translate and asked him whether or not this was a trap and whether or not I was going to, go bye-bye. And he essentially said, probably not, which didn't give me as much confidence as I needed in the moment, but I was still in pretty good spirits until we got closer and closer, and I realized that we were literally in the middle of nowhere. But eventually we arrived, and it was actually pretty sweet. I don't have much footage of it because recording strangers is weird, but it was genuinely the only house in the area that had lights on, and there were like 17 Vietnamese people on a porch just eating and drinking with one random older Norwegian guy, and then me, a random Canadian from the plane. Turns out, though, it wasn't the girl's friends, but rather her family, and the old Norwegian guy was dating the girl's aunt. And even though they didn't really speak English, they just kept feeding me and giving me drinks, and it was actually super sweet. Now, I will say, they did have a pet monkey chained to a tree, which I absolutely did not vibe with, but also, I realized after about 10 minutes that her family was definitely eyeing me up as a prospective partner for their daughter, which was a bit odd, but still very sweet. Eventually, they ended up booking me a grab back to town, and that was the end of that random day. Okay, bye.